You are standing in your kitchen at 2 in the morning, and you don't know why you're crying. Nothing happened today. Nothing you could point to. It's just been building quietly for weeks, and tonight it finally spilled over the edge of whatever container you'd been keeping it in. You didn't call anyone. You didn't turn on a light. You just stood there in the dark, breathing unevenly. And your cat, who has ignored you for most of the evening, who was curled in a tight, indifferent loaf on the windowsill 20 minutes ago, is suddenly at your feet. Not meowing, not demanding food, just pressed against your ankle still, watching you. She wasn't there for the silence. She was there for something underneath it. Here's the question that sits at the center of that moment, the one scientists spent almost 100 years refusing to take seriously. Can animals actually detect human sadness? Or are you just projecting meaning onto a creature that's really just waiting for breakfast? For most of the 20th century, biology had a very clean answer, and it was no. The dominant framework was called behaviorism, and it treated animals as elaborate stimulus response machines. A dog wagging its tail wasn't happy. It was executing a learned motor pattern tied to a social reward history. Emotion, under this model, was something humans projected onto creatures that didn't actually have any. It was tidy, it was scientific sounding, and it was almost certainly wrong. The cracks started appearing from field researchers who couldn't unsee what they were seeing. Chimpanzees who lost a companion stopped eating. They withdrew from their group. They sat alone for days in a way that looked uncomfortably like grief. Elephants returned to the bones of dead herd members years later, sometimes walking for miles to do it, touching the skulls with their trunks for no reason that helped them survive. Then neuroscience settled the argument in a way field observation alone never could. When researchers mapped the limbic system, the cluster of brain structures responsible for processing emotion in humans, they found it wasn't uniquely human at all. It wasn't even uniquely primate. Versions of it, in different sizes and complexities, showed up in nearly every mammal ever scanned. Traces appeared in birds. Fragments showed up in fish. Sit with that for a second. Emotion is not a human invention. It's not a happy accident of having a big brain. It is an ancient piece of biological hardware, hundreds of millions of years old, that evolution kept building on because it worked. Fear kept animals away from things that killed them. Attachment kept social animals bonded to groups that outlived isolated individuals. Grief marked the loss of something that mattered, and it changed behavior in response. If animals have the hardware for feeling something, the next question writes itself. Can they read that same hardware in someone else? Can a creature look at you, not another member of its own species, and correctly detect what's happening inside you? The answer is yes. Measurably, repeatedly, uncomfortably, yes. And the mechanisms behind it are stranger, older, and far more specific than animals just sense things. Start with your dog's nose, because this is where things stop being sweet and start being genuinely strange. A dog's nose holds around 300 million scent receptors. Yours holds about 6 million. That is not a small upgrade, like comparing decent eyesight to great eyesight. It's closer to comparing someone who can hear a whisper across a room to someone who can hear a single word spoken underwater, 3 streets away, through concrete. Your dog isn't experiencing a sharper version of your world. It's experiencing an entirely different layer of reality that you don't have access to at all. And that layer includes you. Specifically, it includes your chemistry. When you're genuinely distressed, your body doesn't just feel different. It becomes chemically different. Cortisol rises, adrenaline shifts, your sweat changes composition, your breath changes composition. None of this is poetic language. These are real molecules drifting off your skin and out of your lungs, floating into the air around you like a scent trail you didn't know you were leaving. A 2022 study in the journal PLOS One tested exactly this. Researchers collected breath and sweat samples from people in high-stress states and from people who were calm, then asked dogs to tell the difference using scent alone, no visual or behavioral cues at all. The dog sorted the stressed samples correctly more than 93% of the time. From a cotton swab, your dog isn't sensing your sadness the way a psychic senses a disturbance. Your dog is smelling it, the way you'd smell smoke drifting in from a fire 2 houses down. By the time you've sat down, the report has already landed. But smell only explains detection. It doesn't explain why the relationship deepens the moment the dog responds to you, and that part has its own biology. In 2015, a team led by researcher Takafumi Kikusui in Japan found something that reframed the entire bond between dogs and humans. When a dog and its owner make sustained eye contact, both species show a measurable spike in oxytocin, the hormone most associated with parental bonding. It's the same chemical loop that fires between a mother and an infant. Dogs appear to have hijacked or perhaps co-evolved into a bonding system originally built for raising human children. The gaze itself becomes a kind of chemical handshake, one that deepens the pull to notice you, respond to you, stay close to you. So, by the time your dog reaches you, two systems have already fired. One detected that something was wrong, chemically, before you said a word. The other has spent years wiring your dog's brain to find your specific presence rewarding in the same neurological currency your own brain uses for people it loves. That's not instinct alone. That's biology built, quite literally, to notice you. Smell explains part of the story, but dogs have developed something on top of it that has almost no equivalent anywhere else in the animal kingdom. They read human faces. For somewhere between 15 and 40,000 years, dogs have lived embedded inside human social life. Not just near us, but inside our routines, our shelters, our emotional atmosphere. Over that span, something unusual happened. Dogs evolved cognitive tools specifically built for interpreting human facial expressions, not dog expressions, human ones. A 2015 study out of the University of Vienna tested this directly. Dogs were shown photos of human faces, some angry, some happy, sometimes only the top half of the face visible, sometimes only the bottom. The faces belonged to complete strangers. The dogs could still tell the difference consistently above chance, and they adjusted their behavior accordingly. Around angry faces, they hesitated, hung back, approached cautiously if at all. Around happy faces, they relaxed and moved closer. Follow-up work found dogs even scan the right side of a human face first, the side that carries the strongest emotional signal, exactly the same bias humans use on each other. That's not a coincidence. That's a tool built, across thousands of years, specifically for reading us. Cats tell a different story, and it's worth taking seriously instead of dismissing as feline indifference. Cats weren't bred for emotional partnership the way dogs were. They were kept around for pest control, which meant no evolutionary pressure toward reading humans in general. And yet a study from Oakland University found cats behave measurably differently around a smiling owner versus a frowning one, approaching and purring more with the former, withdrawing more with the latter. The key detail: this effect showed up strongly with their own owner, and barely at all with strangers. Cats haven't built a universal human reading system. They've built something more personal, a private, accumulated model of one specific person, learned slowly through years of watching just you. Horses push this further into territory that looks almost unsettling. In a 2018 University of Sussex study, horses were shown a photo of a person's face, either angry or happy. Hours later, that same person entered the room and behaved completely neutrally, no expression at all. Horses that had seen the angry photo were noticeably more wary of that neutral stranger than horses that had seen the happy one. The horses weren't reacting to anything happening in the room. They were acting on a memory of an emotional impression formed hours earlier. That's not reflex. That's memory-shaping judgment about someone they'd never actually met. And then there's the finding that breaks the assumption that empathy needs a big brain or a long shared history to exist at all. In 2011, researchers at the University of Chicago ran an experiment with rats. One rat was trapped inside a small enclosure. A free rat could open it with enough effort. The free rats consistently worked to release their trapped companions with no reward for doing so. Then the researchers raised the stakes. They gave the free rat a pile of chocolate chips and the option to keep eating instead of freeing the trapped rat. Most rats freed their companion anyway, and many even saved some chocolate for their now free cage mate. Rats. Choosing a distressed companion's relief over food they clearly liked. Whatever this capacity is, it isn't a niche talent that evolution handed exclusively to dogs or to animals cute enough to end up in our living rooms. It runs deeper and wider than that, threading through species we rarely credit with feeling anything at all. If empathy shows up in rats, the next question is how far it can travel, and elephants give the clearest answer we have. Elephants are among the most emotionally complex animals ever studied. They console distressed herd members. They have specific vocalizations reserved for greeting companions after long separation, calls researchers cautiously describe as sounding like joy. They return to the remains of dead relatives and linger there, touching bones with their trunks, for no reason tied to survival at all. What matters most here is that their empathy doesn't stay confined to their own species. Field researchers have documented young elephants approaching distressed animals of entirely different species, moving calmly, investigating, behaving in ways that look deliberately reassuring. That detail matters more than it seems. It means the capacity to notice and respond to another creature's distress isn't locked to your own kind. It can cross the line between species entirely as long as the signal is clear enough to read. And if elephants can extend that reach toward an unfamiliar animal, there's no real reason that reach would stop at the edge of our species either. We may simply be the distressed creature standing nearby. Now bring this back to detection versus response, because there's a difference, and it's the difference that matters most. In 2018, researchers at Johns Hopkins ran a study with dogs and their owners. Separated by a clear door with a simple magnetic latch, the dog could push open with effort. Half the owners cried and used a distressed tone. Half hummed calmly. Dogs whose owners were crying opened the door far more often. But the detail that stunned the researchers wasn't the door opening itself. It was how it happened. Those dogs opened the door more slowly, more deliberately, more calmly than dogs responding to a neutral cue. Not panicked. Regulated. As though managing their own arousal so they could be steady enough to actually help. That's worth comparing to something from human developmental psychology, because it sharpens exactly what's being described here. In the well-known still face experiments from the 1970s, a parent interacts warmly with their infant, then suddenly goes emotionally blank, expressionless, unresponsive. Infants become distressed almost immediately, not because anything physically changed, but because the emotional signal vanished. What animals seem to be doing with us is the mirror image of that moment. They're not going blank in the face of our distress. They're doing the opposite, reading the signal and choosing to respond to it deliberately instead of looking away. Here's what we still can't answer, and it's worth being honest about the limit. Science can measure behavior. It can measure hormones and brain structures. It cannot climb inside another creature's skull and confirm what, if anything, it's like to be that creature in the moment it presses against you. That question may be permanently out of reach. But consider what we do have. The same brain structures involved in human emotion exist in dogs, cats, horses, elephants, even rats. The behavioral responses line up exactly with what empathy would predict. The responses are targeted, not random, and in some cases actively self-regulated, the way a person might steady their own breathing before comforting a friend. At a certain point, when something looks like empathy, uses the same neural architecture as empathy, and produces the outcomes empathy would produce across thousands of controlled observations, the burden shifts. You're no longer proving it's real. You're explaining why, against all of that, it somehow isn't. There's one more thing worth saying, and it isn't in any journal. When you are truly sad, the kind of sad with no clean solution, most humans don't know what to do with that. They offer advice, they try to fix it, reframe it, move it toward resolution, partly for you and partly because your pain makes them uncomfortable. Animals don't do that. They don't try to talk you out of how you feel. They just come closer and stay there, with no agenda and no urgency to make it stop. So, do animals know when a human is sad? Yes. Dogs detect it chemically, through a sense of smell that makes ours look almost decorative. They read it on human faces using cognitive tools shaped over thousands of years for that exact purpose. Cats build quiet, personal models of the one human they've spent years watching. Horses carry emotional impressions forward in memory and act on them later. Elephants extend care across species lines entirely. Even rats will choose a companion's relief over food, sitting right in front of them. We share this world with creatures that have spent millions of years learning to feel and thousands of years learning to notice what we feel specifically. That's not a small fact. It might be one of the strangest and most important ones about being alive alongside other living things. Your cat didn't fix your bad night. She didn't try to. She just sat by your feet in the dark and stayed. And somehow, without a single word passing between you, you understood exactly what that meant.